Welcome to the Atlantic Current. I'm Vince Martin, here as always with Toll McAdoo from the Irish Politics newsletter. Our topic today is social media, something that we have, of course, talked about before, right? Toll, there's no way that you can talk about politics or culture or even life at this point without social media intruding on the conversation. But we wanted to give social media its own episode, its own focus, because it does kind of peek into everything, but how it does so and how it's used, I think, has really become just such a fascinating part of politics in particular. And you guys are learning that now in Ireland, right?
Yes, Vincent. Hello, listeners. Now, once upon a time, Vincent, the internet was meant to set us free, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the early prophets of the digital age promised an electric democracy via, an app on your phone. In this space, ideas could travel at the speed of light, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers and bringing the truth closer to people. The dream is utopian, liberation by bandwidth, and what we thought was closer to libertarianism by bandwidth, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. There are younger listeners who weren't really around when the internet started and maybe don't have a sense of like kind of how excited people were about it. And particularly the people who were first on it really thought it was going to be almost purely a force for good. And that thing that you're talking about, the free spread of ideas and the ability for people all over the world to meet and discuss those ideas instantly and essentially for nearly free. It's kind of an interesting place to start with social media because they were right in the sense that the structure of social media actually works the way that they thought it would, right? We can talk to anybody in the world. We can discuss all these ideas. It's humans that have failed, those utopians, right? It's the fact that social media has proven that if we have access to all this information, we're just going to choose garbage. We're going to choose things that confirm our priors and nonsense and cat videos over actually trying to educate ourselves or make the world better or learn things or all these kind of, all the more positive possibilities.
So the dream died somewhere around the first retweet or shared post, Vincent, didn't it?
That structure exists, and certainly people have access to this. The numbers for social media in particular in terms of reach are just staggering, right?
Some statistics from an Irish point of view. YouTube in Ireland has 4.11 million users. Facebook is 2.6 million. Instagram another 2.5 million. TikTok, for a particular age generation, has 2.6 million people. LinkedIn, the Sycophants network, has 3.4 million users. Snapchat, which is something I've never used, and I'm aware that children use it, has 2.1 million users. And X has only 1.7 million users.
Yeah.
But has an outsized impact on Irish discourse.
It definitely punches beyond its user weight. Globally, the story is not terribly different. Facebook's reach is so staggering that I think we kind of ignore it, even though it's sitting there in plain sight. They don't report certain metrics anymore, but at the end of 2023, which is the last time they told us the figure, they had over 3 billion monthly active users. There's like 5.5 billion adults in the world, and I think probably 1 billion of them are in China. So if you think about people who live in places where you can get Facebook, something like 2/3, 3/4 of them go to that site every month, which is just a staggering number. In the United States that year, Facebook made $227 off the average user. That's how much advertising they get. Yeah. I mean, the figures in Europe and Asia are lower, but it's still staggering. I mean, Meta, that corporate company, is a $1 trillion company. We're going to start here with Twitter, though.
Yeah.
Because as you said, it really does punch above its weight in terms of its users. And you're seeing that in Ireland right now with the fuel protest, right?
These fuel protests are not happening without social media. It was all organised on.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
I had a politician ring me to say, could I figure something out from whether it was true or not? And when I did a deep dive myself, I was kind of saying to myself, oh, what's going on here? I wasn't sure myself, but I eventually got to the issue and it wasn't true at all. But I spent an hour going down a rabbit hole and often mad tangents trying to figure out the truth of the matter. And it turns out it wasn't true at all.
It's really so much the problem with Twitter is that a lot of the stuff you see and you're kind of curious and you check it out. And sometimes it takes an hour and you're still not sure. And meanwhile, like 95% of people on the platform are not, they're not putting in that hour. They're going like, retweet. Oh my God, quote tweet. How horrible is this?
It's a case of there's so much disinformation out there, particularly on X, because it's unmoderated now.
Yeah.
That it's hard to get to the truth of the matter. I look at things professionally on the internet for people for a living sometimes. Even I'm kind of getting overwhelmed at this stage. And it's got to do with low quality information users flooding the platform. And in some cases, there's nefarious activities going on. There was a report out yesterday by the Institute for Strategic Dialogue that highlighted how Irish users on X are being targeted by Iran, China, Russia. And the accounts of Irish names, Fiona, Siobhan, Kaig, very, very Irish names, but they're operating out of China, Iran, even Iran, targeting us for support. And it's got to do with Elon Musk's free speech absolutism, for want of a better word, that he doesn't care, doesn't want to know. And the flip side of that as well is that his advertisers have abandoned him on X.
Yeah.
The big ones, Volkswagen, Adidas, Nike, they've all abandoned him. And he took him to court recently to sue them because he said it was a coordinated effort, an antitrust issue. And he lost that court case. I think it's a toy for him. It's a very expensive toy for him as opposed to somebody is trying to make money out of it seriously.
He got to a point pretty quickly where he realized that his politics and the Twitter economics were just contradictory. He was going to make less money doing it that way. And we've kind of referred to this a bit before, that his supporters will give him credit for that. Like, oh my God, look at him. He made this huge sacrifice for free speech, which is complete and total because basically 2 days after he agreed to buy Twitter, he started trying to get out of it. He actually I think, has been incredibly fortunate because after he bought it, everyone was like, yeah, the valuation of this thing is really tanked. He lost a lot of money on it. But what he got rescued by was AI. Because Twitter just generates such huge amount of data, which in and of itself is horrifying. Oh, that's where we're getting our answers now? Is Twitter slop? Just these models are ingesting a fire hose of garbage from Twitter and then spitting the answers back to us. I'm not real thrilled about that either.
Yeah, and these AI models have been trained on Twitter, Dad. I mean, we're feeding the stupidity here, aren't we? X is largely a brainless wormhole, bots as well. An AI company took a look at 1.3 million X accounts. I came back with a cheerful estimate that 65% of them are bots. They're not even real people. That's not a margin of error, Vincent. That's an infestation.
Elon was talking about that even before he bought the platform, said he was going to fix it.
No, in fairness, X is not the only platform that has a bot problem.
Oh, God, no.
Every quarter in 2024, Meta has shut down 1.1 billion fake accounts every quarter. At any one stage, Facebook is overrun with kind of imaginary dentists, counterfeit yoga instructors, and whole battalions of Albanian teenagers pretending to be widowed South County Dublin MILFs, Vincent. You can't trust anything on the internet. And if you thought your childhood friend who you haven't seen in years is suddenly interested in cryptocurrency, shock horror, he probably isn't. So.
It is funny that Facebook kind of does get a little bit of a pass. I think that's partially because, at least in the U.S., the reputation of Facebook now is it's just kind of used by older people. It is massively bigger than Twitter, but it does feel like its effect is a little bit more siloed. Doesn't really feel like things on Facebook bleed into the real world, even though if you go on it now, there's just stuff on there. This is a term Trump so successfully stole, that there is stuff on there now. It's just fake news.
Yeah.
I mean, just literally imaginary. There was one that went viral after the college championship game for American football here. Somebody posted on Facebook that one of the losing players taunted the mother of a player on the winning team who's in a wheelchair. And it just went all around Facebook and people were out, oh my God, what a horrible thing to do. Like, look at what a sack of this guy is. And it was just like, it just never happened. No one was even sure like kind of why someone posted this. The reputation of Facebook here, it's like, oh, that's just older people. It doesn't really seem to affect politics as much, at least here.
I would counter that it affects politics immensely. There was the famous Cambridge Analytica scandal where they, Facebook sold your data to a research company essentially and was able to micro-target political ads, and they weaponize people's fears essentially. And
that's a great point.
What the Facebook had to pay, they paid a $200 million fine or something to that effect.
3 hours revenue. Zuckerberg cried himself to sleep on his $5,000 pillow that night, I'm sure.
We talked about misinformation on X, but the amount of misinformation on Meta is something bloody else. It really is. You saw this during COVID. People pushing, what was it, detergent? If you drink this detergent, it'll stop you getting COVID. I mean,
that was Trump's alleged claim that he told people to drink bleach, which itself is a little kind of a funny, interesting social media thing. He didn't tell people to drink bleach, but people went on social media and said, "Oh my God, people are so dumb that they're going to drink bleach." He said, if we got bleach inside the body, we could kill all the germs. We could kill the virus."
The amount of misinformation on COVID was absolutely staggering.
Yeah,
it really was. I see people were at home all day on their own, sitting around in their jocks, drinking beers, doom scrolling on Facebook because they couldn't go to work.
Yeah,
and that was just me. So, look, it's not going to go away. I don't know how governments are going to deal with it either, to be perfectly honest. They're talking about, handing out big fines now in Ireland, because Ireland is the hub, essentially, for regulating social media in Europe, and our European partners are saying we need to hit these people with some serious fines. That's the only way to get them to regulate what's going on, the amount of misinformation out there. So,
right.
I'm not sure that's going to work either. I mean, the amount of advertising on social media is somewhere, it's $1 trillion global industry now these days,
Yeah. I don't know how you fix misinformation. And I think one of the problems with what you're talking about with COVID is that trying to combat what people said was misinformation and disinformation, I think very clearly had severe consequences. Because what has happened now is that Twitter, under Elon's ownership, Facebook, things like that, they deleted posts, they banned people for pushing what they said was misinformation. And then now what a lot of people now say is, oh no, that wasn't misinformation. They were right. And a lot of that in the U.S. centers on this so-called lab leak theory, the idea that the story of the pandemic, that it started at a wet market. It started by someone eating a bat, right?
Wuhan, yes.
In Wuhan, was not true. And then once you go from there, depending on where you're, it was a massive cover-up. Anthony Fauci, who was in charge of the pandemic response here, he was involved. He was paying all these people. So the very act of trying to combat it during COVID, first of all, I don't think it worked. I think that's pretty clear if you look at public opinion about the pandemic. And secondly, what it then did, it gave Elon such an opening to take over Twitter and change it the way he has, because the response to anyone saying what you're saying, that, this needs moderation, this needs guardrails, is no, because we had moderation in 2020 and they just suppressed the truth. And I mean, and that's exactly what they're going to say. And to be honest, I don't think they're 100% wrong. I think there were people who were posting things like, it's stupid to have schools closed. I don't necessarily agree with the broader point, but this is not imaginary. I think that at the very least, it's a real debate. And the problem is, I don't know how you settle that debate halfway. We have a little bit of moderation. It's already impossible to draw the line on something like that in terms of what's true and what's false and what's information and how you're posting it, when you can't even agree that the line should be drawn. Whether it's Elon, whether it's whoever owns Twitter, whether it's Zuckerberg, whether it's governments, it is really an impossible problem, not even to solve, but just even to approach. I don't even know where you would start.
I don't want to get bogged down talking about COVID and social media. It'll be a 12-part episode otherwise. But I will say this, and when politicians amplify misinformation, that's the real kind of issue there. So during COVID, we had Sinn Féin TD Brian Stanley, and we've an old saying in Ireland, if you have brains, you'll be dangerous. He went on local radio in the Midlands 103 FM, and a very skillful journalist played rope-a-dope with him. And Brian Stanley had basically implied that you could get COVID from your crispy shredded chicken down your local Chinese takeaway.
Jeez.
I will post that video on our Substack as well in case people haven't seen it. I think the last time I checked, it'd been viewed nearly 1 million times. But I posted that to X at the time, and it was astonishing. People's jaws were on the floor. a politician, a so-called serious person, went on local radio and said you can get COVID from your local takeaway. Ireland's not unique with politicians doing mad things over social media, is it, Vincent?
No, God, no. No, we see that all the time here. Even here, its effect on the right, I think, is a little bit underappreciated. People have a sense about it. But how much it now moves Republican politics, I think, would be a surprise to some people. So there's actually an interesting way to kind of look at this. Told this is our 34th episode.
Right.
I'm going to say what is the most boring sentence in the history of the Atlantic Current. Are you excited? You ready?
Go looking.
All right.
Okay, right.
In June 2023, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill that prohibited local governments in the state from banning the use of gas stoves.
Right. Okay. What's this got to do with
there is a point here. It's going to be more interesting than the opening suggests. And if it's not, we're just going to edit it out. So, All right. So we're going to start January 2022. So about 18 months earlier, Stanford University, a very respected institution in California, they come out with a study, and it says that gas stoves powered by natural gas instead of electricity here, they may be harmful to people's health. And their study shows that across multiple models, different ages, different times of manufacture, the stoves leak. And they leak methane, which is a climate change problem. And they leak nitrogen oxides, which can exacerbate respiratory issues for people who live in the house. And, these stoves can get air quality to dangerous levels very quickly. Mm-hmm. And the study gets kind of a burst of attention in mainstream media, as these things often do. I'm sure it's the same in Ireland, right?
I remember that study, yes. I actually remember sharing the study.
But as is often the case, everybody covers it. It's in the news cycle for 24 hours and then it fades. In October, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is a federal government agency that is exactly what it sounds like, they put out a request for information on potential hazards to users of gas stoves. And this does not get any attention. In mid-December, one of the 5 commissioners that leads that agency, a guy named Richard Trumka Jr., he holds a webinar, and it's reported on by The Hill, which focuses just on DC politics. And in this webinar, he says that a ban on gas stoves is, quote, a real possibility. And once again, no one notices. As far as I can tell, there's no other coverage of it. If you go on Twitter for like the last half of December, there's like a couple people like, yeah, gas stoves are dangerous. People need to pay attention. They get like 25 likes. 4 weeks later, the same guy, Trumka, gives an interview with Bloomberg on January 9th. And he once again says that a ban on gas stoves is on the table. And right-wing social media goes bananas. Absolutely explodes.
Right. Vincent, why is it the Bloomberg story that blows this thing up?
Yeah, not all the earlier coverage. I don't know, to be honest. I think that's kind of an under-discussed part of social media, right? Like there is some luck of just being in the right place for the algorithm or not. Like every now and then we see these videos of people losing their minds on airplanes. And there's that one really famous one with the woman going, that expletive is not here, and that broke through. But there are no doubt dozens of those kind of videos that are sitting on Twitter with like 300 views. There's that Hawk Tua girl. Did you guys know?
Last December, something she made a crypto coin or something.
Yeah,
a rug, and there was what's called a rug pull, where it was pumped and then dumped. But she went viral for a sex joke, and it was kind of in the moment thing after she had a few beers on her. And you wouldn't be making those kind of confessions if you were sober, I suppose. And I've seen people become famous and go viral for some pretty weird things, but the Hawk Tua girl is a lesson in the dangers of social media also.
And the woman on that airplane video, she became an influencer, of course. She has hundreds of thousands of followers and is trying to monetize it. So it is dangerous, but, it can also be a massive opportunity. But those stories, though, I think are a little bit of the point. Why did they break through? In any case, the Bloomberg story is a huge, huge catalyst. It gets picked up by some influencers on the right, and then you can kind of see if you look back at the history on Twitter, on X, the size of the influencers covering it just gets bigger and bigger. And so that by the next day, it is everywhere. And then you see the right-wing media and the right-wing politicians follow. And I think that's an interesting point because I want to use this as kind of an example of how the American right works. And that's a really key point to understand right now. This is a grassroots thing.
Is grassroots the right word, I wonder?
No, probably not for people who need to go touch grass. Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, at the very least, it's authentic. I think that we still have this narrative even here that Fox News is shaping the narrative, shaping where conservative media goes. This is an example of something that happens over and over again where Republican politicians respond to social media. It's Sean Hannity, who's the biggest host on Fox News. He doesn't do a segment on this until after Twitter goes nuts. The first mention on foxnews.com is a story where they're actually covering how crazy Twitter went. And we have examples of this all the time. There's a guy named Nick Shirley who's blown up on the right. He goes on YouTube and he does these videos where he's supposedly uncovering fraud at daycare centers. He started in Minnesota. And now, to what extent he's telling the truth or is just mistaken is a source of huge debate. But he testified in the House of Representatives in January. It's completely changed Republican discourse. And they're all saying, oh, look at all this fraud. We already knew this was going on. There's been an investigation about this for 3 years. There have been over 60 convictions. An investigation started, obviously, under the Biden administration. But that never caught the eye of the people that mattered on the right. Now that it has, it's blown up. And you have Republican politicians literally changing their attitude towards taxes in the budget because now they have the ability, or maybe they have to keep voter support. Say, oh, well, we don't need to raise taxes because there's so much fraud. It's all just waste.
Yeah, I don't know. And I've seen Elon Musk, the protagonist of misinformation in chief. He keeps retweeting these as well, and he just puts "whoa" or one word replies. There's something going on similar in California at the moment, allegedly, and Elon Musk keeps retweeting this guy. He's waded into the Irish protests too, hasn't he? Yes, you had Eddie Hobbs. He is a political commentator, a financial analyst type person who has some very curious views in recent years. That's all our libel laws will allow me to say.
Understood. Yeah.
He was on Steve Bannon's War Room yesterday, spouting all kinds of mad stuff, and I kind of looking at this and I'm like, good grief. Yeah. There's nowhere this kind of right-wing grift won't go, will it? And it's all fueled by social media money. Yeah. The more eyes on your account is the more money you earn, essentially. It's spawned a quite nefarious political movement, for want of a better word. And it started in the States and it's branched out all over Europe now. And everywhere you look, there's people, these right-wing accounts looking to make money. I mean, one of the most influential MAGA accounts, right-wing accounts, is a guy called Cat Turd.
Cat Turd, yeah. So influential, makes so much money that this is not a joke. This is true. He has trademarked in the United States. He has trademarked the name Cat Turd to make sure there are no cat turd imposters trying to sell merchandise without his permission. That is not a joke. It is trademarked. Yet Nate Silver, who's a really interesting data researcher, he had a Twitter post out, right, a week or two ago, showing the biggest influencers on X now. It's kind of a bubble thing, and we'll put that on the Substack too. But it was really telling, the debate about that, because it's all the big bubbles they're all right wing.
Yeah.
And they're all like cat turd level people, right? It's
not serious analysis.
No, it's all clickbait. It's a lot of videos and a lot of conspiracy theories. Laura Loomer is a big one up there. I mean, this is another great example of how social media affects politics. She's the one who flew with Trump to the debate in 2024. And she had seen all the stuff on social media about Haitian immigrants in Ohio eating cats and dogs, got on the plane with Trump and whispered it in his ear. And at the presidential debate, one of the candidates came out and said, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs because of social media.
Yes, immigrants eating cats and dogs.
And that was a truly a social media thing, to the point that they actually pinpointed kind of the first post I made that went viral, and the poor woman came out and apologized. She posted, one of these immigrants ate my friend's daughter's cat. was the first accusation. And they tracked her down. She's like, no, I heard it third hand and I just posted it. And her quote, I mean, really just kind of tells you so much about social media. Her quote was, "It just exploded into something I didn't mean to happen," which is just like, yeah, I mean, that's exactly what social media is.
There's a guy called Eric Doherty. Who's he? He's an Irish-American sounding name. Who's he, Vincent? He's one of the biggest influencers, right-wing influencers. I'd never heard of him until you pointed him out to me.
He's almost bad by their standards. It's a lot of all caps. Libs are stunned that Donald Trump came out and said, and then it's some like terrible 8-10 second clip. He's really just a pure outrage farmer. He's one of those guys you look at him and go, okay, well, he's a total moron, but he at least understands how the game works. He pulls up clips that happened 4 months ago. I think very clearly he realized, if a clip does well, then he brings it back up 3 months later. The funny thing about Twitter, if a post on Twitter starts with the word breaking, then it happened like 6 months ago. It is absolutely not news under any circumstance. Yeah, if there's like 2 sirens next to it, then it did not happen 6 months ago. It's false and old.
And one thing I've noticed about that social media analysis, who are the biggest influencers on X, there's no media publications there.
Yeah. Yep.
There's no trusted media. I mean, the New York Post is there, but that's a tabloid. I mean, they have mad stories all the time. But like say in the top 20 there I'm looking at, there's no legacy media there. There's no trusted media sources. No, not at all. And that was what was funny, because there was some debate on Twitter when Silver posted that, of course. Mostly people on the right were going, well, see, this shows what Elon did, because before Elon, people on the right were censored. This was a left-wing platform. It was a left-wing echo chamber. And it was very funny to watch people on the right make that argument and miss the entire point, that these people are all idiots. Yes. And they are catering to idiots. This is like, if you understand who these people are, this is just the lowest quality information you could possibly have. In some cases, it's outright false. In the best cases, it's completely skewed and presented in a certain way. And it was very funny, like people on the right going, oh, look how upset liberals are that these are the winners. Liberals aren't necessarily upset that the winners are on the right. Liberals are upset that this is the garbage, that these people are getting, without exaggeration, billions of impressions every month, and leading the discussion on here. And, kind of to get back to our story, these people matter because they affect politics. They absolutely do. They shape a narrative which bubbles up into politics. So yeah, you see a guy. There's a guy called Nick Fuentes, right? He's about 6 million followers or something to that effect.
Yeah,
he's a pretty anti-Semitic guy.
Yeah, yeah,
and he's been courted by some politicians in that sense as well. And I'm like, the Republican Party, I think, has been led by the social media nose to some extent, isn't it?
Of course, yeah, and that's what this gas stove story is all about. We have examples over and over again of social media moving up into policy. So in this case, with the gas stoves, like I said, there's this thing comes out from the agency. Conservative social media goes nuts. Conservative media then jumps onto the social media story, and then the politicians come. So DeSantis is pretty smart. I mean, he's a smart guy. In 2 days, he jumps out with this "Don't Tread on Florida" theme, which is kind of playing on the "Don't Tread on Me," the famous flag here during the Revolution, the Gadsden flag. And he's gearing up to run for president, which he will do in a couple months. So his campaign starts selling merchandise, right? T-shirts with the gas stove, "Don't Tread on Florida," and all this stuff. And he gives a speech on the issue. He jumps right in. It's exceptionally successful for him, I think. I mean, obviously the campaign doesn't work, but he no doubt makes a lot of money. He gets to play right to the social media crowd. And again, none of this happens. Not a single thing happens if social media doesn't pick up on it. This is something that comes straight from the bottom up, and I think it really gives you a sense of how they can affect actual policy.
Yeah, there's a lot of money knocking around social media and politics as well. Facebook, the social media platforms have stopped releasing data on who's running political ads because of Europe's laws. And with traditional media on the wane and no longer as influential as it once was, the money is migrating to where the biggest bang for your buck can be got, and that is on social media. And In the 2024 general election in Ireland, there was about $1 million spent. Okay, I've seen various figures between 750 and €1 million. And I can assure you now, if they're saying it was about €1 million, I'd go so far as to say it was probably more, €1.5 million that was spent.
Yeah.
Because it's very easily done. It's very easily done that you can hide your social media advertising. And,
right.
you don't really have to, you're meant to declare it, but you don't really have to. There's ways and means around it. I mean, if you give me $1 million, I'm going to get around it for you. Kamala Harris spent $400 million on her social media ad buy for her electoral bid. Whereas Donald Trump only spent $142 million. And do you know why he was able to get away with spending $142 million?
Well, he gets all the free impressions.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cat Turd.
Yep.
Nick Fuentes, all the other headbangers, all sharing his stuff immediately.
There is a right-wing media machine. To use this story as an example that really shows how this works. The right-wing media machine here is so powerful that DeSantis, who at this point, it's known he's running for president. He hasn't officially announced. But he instantly wants to jump and ride this wave. That's how powerful it is. I mean, he really legitimately thinks that this gas stove issue can help him politically. And it's really kind of funny that DeSantis is the guy doing this, because if you're not that familiar with him, he is a legit guy. He is a brilliant guy. And I would argue that he actually has been a really good governor in Florida.
Right. Okay.
And I think if you kind of go to a pre-Trump era, he is your classic American presidential candidate. I mean, this is kind of who we want. People who succeeded running a state, and we say, okay, we're going to give you a shot to run a country. And I think it's interesting that DeSantis, who has done a lot of effective stuff, does this thing that's solely performative. Like, the funny thing about all this, when you get to the end of it, 8% of people in Florida have gas stoves.
Right.
Like, he's making this big deal. Oh, don't tread on Florida. And people are looking at it going, yeah, this isn't what Florida does. You guys live in a swamp. It's a lot harder to run underground gas lines in a swamp.
Vincent, what strikes me here is not so much the performative outrage by the politicians, but nobody's actually seen if the study is actually true or not. And
yeah, that's not relevant.
How dangerous these stoves are. Because, I mean, if stoves were that dangerous, I'm pretty sure Europe would have legislated for them already,
Right. The study is contentious. If you look it up, there are people in the field that come out and go, no, I don't think this is very good science. But to your point, no one on social media cares. It's not even mentioned, which is kind of the brilliance of the machine on the right. It's instantly cast as the Biden administration wants to ban stoves.
Yeah.
When the truth is that one commissioner at one agency started a process that he said might lead to a ban on gas stoves if the evidence went there. And it's an incredibly nuanced point. There's almost no chance that this was going to happen, just politically. Even if the agency pushed for it, Biden administration probably was not going to want to do it. But, the nature of social media, the nature of 280 characters, the nature of outrage, everything gets shrunk. And because everything gets shrunk, you have to make your point in the most compelling way possible. And usually that's going to be the most polarizing way possible, right?
It's a case of how neatly you can package your outrage in 280 characters, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if those really were dangerous, Vincent, I'm telling you, the EU would have banned them already. And then the libs of TikTok X account would have been talking about how Europe is taking your stoves and your freedom away from you.
Exactly. And that's how they positioned it here. And it's funny to point out, I actually randomly saw this. The Republicans are still talking about gas stoves. Jim Jordan, who's a member of the House of Representatives, is kind of like their attack dog. He led all their investigations and stuff. He posted this on Thursday. Democrats wanted to take away your gas stoves.
Oh, good God.
It's just not true. I mean, it's just, as soon as the story broke, the Biden administration was like, no, we're not doing that. Didn't matter. You'll never convince a MAGA voter that Democrats did not try to take away your gas stoves, only to be rebuffed by freedom-loving Americans.
America, as a society, always moves to where the money is. Oil, railroads, gold rush, silver rushes.
Podcasts,
yes. The podcast industrial complex.
That's right.
And social media is where the money's at the moment. It's the creator economy, they're calling it. And how you know it's incredibly significant is because almost $2 billion in 2024. Now, it was a massive election year in the United States, of course.
Of course.
It's probably an outlier, but almost $2 billion was spent on social media advertising.
Yeah.
Which is an astounding amount of money. And it's driving everything. And I think there's elements of why the right wing might be so good at it is because they may be a little bit more entrepreneurial than those on the left.
Yeah,
you know?
that could be.
And I know that's just a theory that, they left their holier than thou, I suppose, and they're shocked and appalled by the tactics of the right. And they shouldn't be really, It's a case of, if you can't beat them, join them, and the left has been reluctant to stoop to the looks of the right winger, and that's what the right winger beating him at every turn.
I think there's some truth to that, although the existence of this machine on the right, and that really affects Republican politics, it has its roots in the pre-internet, pre-social media age. This goes back to talk radio. In 1987, the Reagan administration repealed what was known as the Fairness Doctrine. And what that said was that if you're on radio or television, you had to give equal time to both sides.
Yeah.
And once that happened, then you could have shows on television or on radio that were one-sided, that were conservative or liberal. And conservative talk radio exploded very quickly. The most famous guy was even older Irish listeners will know, Rush Limbaugh, who really shaped conservative narrative in the 1990s. And going back to the 90s, the left in America has said over and over again, we need to build a media machine. We need something that can compete with Fox News. We need something that can compete with right-wing Twitter. And they have just never done it. They've never come close. They tried in radio. They built this company called Air America, which had a bunch of left-wing talk radio hosts. They were like, hey, look, Rush Limbaugh makes, $1 billion a year. Surely people listen to liberals. The company went bankrupt in less than 3 years. Somebody bought it out of bankruptcy, and it went bankrupt again in like 2.5 years. It never had a chance. And you can still, if you go on like Substack or whatever now, you'll see these posts. Liberals need to build out a media infrastructure. It's why we're losing elections. And I think there is a core problem that, part of it on Twitter is that I think liberals, there is such a deep contradiction between just telling untruths to push liberal values, right? You can't imagine somebody who wants to fix poverty by spreading on Twitter. It's kind of it's a very, very small Venn diagram to describe people. So there's a supply problem. There's also a demand problem. Liberals, for whatever reason, just don't get sucked in. It's the same that we have MS Now, which is the left-wing cable news network. It gets like 20% of the viewership of Fox and has like 0.20% of the influence in America. Liberals just here, for reasons that I don't think they themselves completely seem to understand, they want to do other things.
And TikTok is also an incredible source of misinformation.
Yeah.
It's banned in China. Did you know that, Vincent?
Yeah, we've talked about that before. Yeah.
It's banned in China, okay?
Yep.
They have an equivalent over there, and the social media is so stringent that children or under 18 are only allowed to use it from 1 to 2 hours every day.
Right.
And then they're locked out of it. They can't get into their account. So the Chinese take this very seriously. And they've seen the harm and damage that it's doing the children. They've done the studies and they've said we're going to unleash this very dangerous app on the West. And it is dangerous, right? Okay. For doom scrolling, essentially, you're fed 30-second clips of something and you're just doom scrolling all bloody day. I mean,
yeah.
It had 24 trillion views in 2024. Trillion. That's so many. I can't get my head around that kind of amount of zeros kind of thing, And
no, that's one of those numbers where like it's equal to the amount of grains of sand, at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean or something. It's not a number that human being can actually process. Yeah.
It's an astounding figure. I have an issue with teachers, though well-intentioned, using TikTok. I have a problem with teachers feeding an addiction, essentially.
Yeah.
They're trying to make learning cool. They're pushing it as an education tool, but they're wrong. Instead of enhancing education, they're feeding an addiction. They're outsourcing the job to an algorithm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
I find that very troubling and very dark and kind of very dystopian. And people have been dying because of these TikTok challenges. Remember there was the pod challenge and the blackout game, and kids are dying from these bloody social media challenges. Like it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. The app is so dangerous. The Chinese won't allow it in their society, but they're letting it run rampant all over Europe and the Western world, and everywhere else for that matter. Because it's turning children's brains to mush. Okay.
Yeah, we had a pretty big court case here where Facebook and some other platforms lost in a case in Arizona over specifically that issue over harm to children. Now, that's going to get appealed, but it is at least a piece of evidence to suggest that if you look at the data here, it has real harm. You can compare it to cigarettes or alcohol. Like alcohol is a great example. Like there are social benefits to alcohol. Let's not pretend otherwise, but it has very real downsides. And, social media does have benefits. There are these niche communities that exist because of it and things like that. But to pretend that there aren't downsides, to pretend that it's just wacky kids on there. And I'm in a weird generation because I'm personally old enough that I grew up even into my 20s without social media mattering or even really existing. And now my kid is young enough that she's not using it yet. So I have kind of missed how it affects younger people. It's an integrated part of life for people in their teens and 20s now, right?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to be an influencer, don't they?
Well, there's that part. Yeah, the career path part of it, yeah.
As much money as they can garner for doing very little, lip syncing. I mean, TikTok is the worst of all these rotting cathedrals, to be perfectly honest with you. It really is. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it with friends, children as well. I mean, how many hours you spend on TikTok? One kid came back to me and said 40 hours at one stage.
Wow. Yeah.
That's if you had a full-time job, you wouldn't be working 40 hours. You would in America, not in Europe.
Yeah, so. I was going to say, that's like 3 days of work here.
You talk about the addiction there, and when the screen goes dark for these people, it's not silence they're feeling, but it's a shrinking black hole sucking away at your sanity. You want that dopamine hit again, and people are judging their self-worth by their online impressions, by likes, by shares. Quite dystopian. Some might argue that I'd be a political influencer, Vincent. That's a term I'm very uncomfortable with, to be perfectly honest, because I despise influencers, So I suppose it could be classed as an influencer on one level, but I do despise the term.
It is a fun look at a little bit of the hypocrisy that all of us have when we do this holier than thou stuff about social media, because we're having this conversation because of the same technologies, the same developments, the same companies that are creating social media platforms. Particularly if somebody does it on a podcast or on Substack or on Twitter or whatever, and they look down at social media, what you are basically saying is, well, I'm better than those people. And you're kind of getting at that too. You're like, well, they're an influencer. I'm a podcaster. Like at the end of the day, what's the difference? The difference is a podcaster tries, right? Like a podcaster is actually I think if you call yourself a podcaster writing on Substack, that kind of means that your goal is actually to add information, is actually to try. The idea of the influencer, it's completely results oriented, going back to X and these right-wing accounts. There's no higher calling there. If I do this, the number on the money bar goes up. And that's one of the really underrated things that Elon did, is creating this monetization system there where it's really just incentivize you to get traffic above all else. There's nothing in the financial algorithm for quality. And as you said before, particularly in America, people go where the money is. And that's a big reason why I think that platform has changed under Elon.
Before Elon Musk took over X, I was getting a lot of newsletter traffic from X.
Yeah.
And since he took it over, it went from, nearly 50% of my traffic coming to the website has dropped to approximately 3%. Nobody's reading, nobody's clicking into links on X. And the media have a problem here as well in terms of, I'm looking at, say, the Irish Times, Irish Independent, New York Times, take your pick. I don't think people are clicking into their articles either.
No.
Yeah. I genuinely don't. Cause for the simple reason is people on X are not there to read. They're there for, little nuggets of information that they don't have to spend 5 minutes reading or 10 minutes reading or whatever the case may be,
That's been a long-running problem here. Facebook has been accused of killing local news in particular here for about 10 years. Now, local newspapers obviously were struggling before all this. It's not like, our local journalism was wonderful and then Facebook took it out back, would beat it to death with a shovel. It was going in the wrong direction to begin with, but Facebook very clearly accelerated that, because if you're a local newspaper and you put what resources you have into a story, it winds up on Facebook just getting discussed. You're not getting any clicks. You're not getting any monetization. And Facebook has done deals with publishers and things like that to try and combat that a little bit. I've written about this before. There is a real irony to social media in the sense that news in a social media world should be infinitely more valuable than it was 20 years ago, because it creates so much economic activity. If the New York Times published a story 30 years ago, it sold copies of the New York Times. Now it sells copies of the Times and traffic to their website, but it drives discussion on a podcast that gets advertising revenue or subscription revenue, right? It creates content for television shows. It creates traffic on Twitter, which is monetized with advertising. It creates traffic on Facebook. And what I wrote was basically like, this is kind of something where capitalism really failed, because we never figured out a way to really directly reward the people at the New York Times for putting this information out. There's just an entire ecosystem of people riding on that information for free. And sometimes they're free riding with the intent of helping people, of moving the conversation forward. And unfortunately, I think particularly on Twitter and Facebook, they're free riding purely for monetization, just to drive traffic.
Yes. No, I have to say the Irish Times and I think the Sunday Times released statements recently. They're two different publications, in case users in America are not aware. And they said they're now fully funded by subscriptions as opposed to their paper money.
Yeah.
But
that's great.
Selling, physical newspapers, something you could hold, which I'm a bit of a traditionalist, which I still do sometimes.
There is a great thing about walking into like a small Irish pub, especially like a rural pub, and there's like 6 newspapers on the bar.
Yeah.
I always really enjoyed that as an American. I know that sounds like the most yank tourist thing to say, but I'll say it anyways.
Look, the problem here, where politics, geopolitics, current affairs podcast, is that social media is influencing politics.
Yeah.
In far more nefarious ways that we're able to get our head around.
Yep.
We've deep fakes. We have so much misinformation out there that there will become a crucial juncture going forward in society where we regulate social media because of its cancerous influence on politics. I think that's where we're going eventually. I think we will have to go there eventually. I
would argue against that for one reason. I think the scale of the addiction is wide enough and deep enough. That's going to be an unpopular decision for governments to do. I think their users are going to rebel. If you want to make the alcohol analogy, it is like kind of instantly banning alcohol. I don't know what the speakeasy version of, ban Twitter would be for Irish users, but there you go. Yeah. You got your VPN speakeasies, but I think it's too entrenched. To me, the thing that is just absolutely terrifying is we are pretty close to a point where AI images and video are not going to be distinguishable.
Yeah, we're nearly there already.
It's close. We talked about this in our January 6th episode, this idea that in America in particular, there are different realities.
Yeah. Not
different politics, but different people who live in worlds that they view as fundamentally different. The combination of social media, which itself accelerates polarization, we have study after that, and creates echo chambers, puts people on their own. The combination of that plus videos where you can't tell if they're honest or not. If reality already is kind of fractured between different groups, what does it look like in 5 years? That's the thing that really terrifies me about where we're going, is you're going to have people who believe things after things after things that just aren't true, that are just AI generated, whether that's because a human guided it and realized it would make money, or because, AI machines have gone amok and they're just flooding Twitter with AI videos of cats saving firemen to pacify its human underlings.
Right. Now, Vincent, there was one platform I didn't talk about, and maybe we'll talk about in future episodes, LinkedIn. Okay. Right. They're not immune from bots either. 25% of all traffic on LinkedIn is bots, right? So, you know what the difference between LinkedIn and Twitter is?
There's a lot, but I'm curious where you're going.
On LinkedIn, you got the job or the promotion by displaying just the right amount of sycophancy. And on Twitter, the employee burnt the office down and slept with the boss's wife.
Yeah.
That's probably the main difference between the two platforms. So apologies to everybody we offended there.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an irreverent current affairs podcast. So if you've been offended, sorry, not sorry. I'll post a tweet or a meme later. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin.
Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you now.